Welcome to Short Movie Channel with an exciting news summary. At the beginning of our movie today, we meet a teenage girl named Reese. We see her sitting in her small room, which is filled with landline phones hanging on the walls. Suddenly, one of the phones, with a sticky note attached to it, rings once. Reese picks up the receiver and hears a recorded voice congratulating her on her victory. As she tries to understand what's happening, all the other phones start buzzing at the same time, all playing the same recorded message. Out of nowhere, water starts pouring from the receiver, quickly filling the room. At that moment, Reese focuses on the toilet hanging from the ceiling and realizes she needs to flush it. She starts climbing the wall, using the phones stuck everywhere for support. But when she reaches the top, she can't find the flush handle. She knows she has to act fast before she drowns. She calms down and recalls the number written on the note. Luckily, an idea strikes her just in time. She swims downward, grabs one of the phones, and dials the number. Her plan works. A hidden compartment inside the phone opens, revealing the missing flush handle. She quickly climbs back up, attaches the handle, and flushes. The water drains completely, saving her life. A few moments later, we discover that the whole experience was actually a virtual reality game. As Reese takes off her gaming headset, we see that she's in a gaming center, surrounded by professional players. Later, she heads home and has dinner with her dad, Chris. We get a glimpse of their close bond, especially since Reese lost her mother at a young age. Suddenly, the lights start flickering before exploding. Then, we see the same thing happening in different parts of the city. Lights shutting off and electrical devices malfunctioning. Chris assumes it's just a temporary power outage affecting the area. But Reese notices that her phone has no signal, and she can't contact anyone. Unfortunately, something more serious is happening. Her device suddenly overheats, and she struggles to turn it off. Meanwhile, the computer shuts down completely. Later, in the living room, Chris lights a gas lamp and tells Reese that maybe this power outage is a good thing. It might give them a break from technology. The two sit together, reminiscing over old photos on her iPad, recalling memories of Reese's mother. After a while, they both fall asleep on the couch. In the middle of the night, Reese hears a strange noise coming from their storage room. Without waking her father, she grabs the gas lamp and cautiously enters. While searching, she finds a book titled Radioflash, which refers to another term. As she looks around, we learn that the storage room once belonged to her grandfather, Frank, who left years ago to live in the mountains. Reese removes a blanket covering a table and finds a radio transmitter. Hoping to contact Frank and get some answers, she connects the parts and powers up the device. To her relief, he responds after a few moments. Frank is also alarmed by the massive power outage and calls it an end-of-the-world catastrophe. Based on his knowledge, he tells her that the entire western part of the U.S. has been affected by this mysterious blackout. He suspects that electromagnetic pulses might be behind it. Frank then asks about Chris, and when he learns that he's asleep, he tells Reese to have her father call him in the morning via radio. Time is running out. Frank urges them to leave their house immediately and come to the mountains, where he has plenty of supplies stored. Before ending the call, he gives Reese the location of a map and a radio phone that will guide them on their journey. However, the radio will only work when they are within 5 miles of Frank's location. It becomes clear that Frank had been preparing for this day for a long time. The next morning, Reese listens to what he said. Her father is informed of what happened, and at first, Chris refuses to go to Frank up in the mountains. He tells her that Frank is crazy and out of his mind. But when his daughter insists, he finally decides to at least call him. After a while, the two of them head to that level, and Reese turns on the radio. As they drive, Chris and Frank start talking. At first, the old man explains to his son the real reason behind the power outage. He tells him that everything happening is due to an electromagnetic surge, which will soon cause chaos and destruction across the states. He also tells him that all the tools and resources he has will run out within 3 days. Because of that, the only safe solution is for them to come to him in the mountains. When Chris hears this, he is finally convinced and decides to leave immediately. After a while, he and Reese start gathering their things, but the situation outside keeps getting worse. Police officers and citizens start fighting each other because of the power outage. No one knows what's going on, and they have no idea when this situation will end. At this point, Chris and Reese get in their car and begin their journey. On the way, they stop at the only grocery store still open to grab a few supplies. But inside, they find people acting violently, fighting over basic resources like water and food. So they decide to leave quickly. As they drive away, we see thousands of people also trying to escape the town. In the next scene, the father and daughter are forced to stop at a bridge due to an accident blocking the road. People are waiting, and one person rams into the overturned car on the bridge to move it. This clears the way for others to pass. Chris and Reese quickly get back into their car and continue their journey. That night, Reese wakes up and realizes they missed their turn and are going the wrong way. This distracts Chris for a moment, and his eyes leave the road. In that split second, he loses control of the car and crashes into the trees near the forest. The next morning, Chris wakes up Reese and makes sure she's okay and unharmed. But Chris himself has a head injury, and he starts feeling lightheaded. The two decide to walk along the lake shore to reach Frank's place faster. On the other side, Frank starts worrying because they were supposed to arrive during the day. Meanwhile, Chris is struggling to walk, and his arm is injured. Reese tries to treat his wound, but Chris insists he's fine. They continue their journey, but Chris gets weaker over time. Eventually, he collapses and loses consciousness. He tells his daughter to call for help. Reese doesn't waste any time. She runs into the forest searching for help. Luckily, she finds a barn and meets a farmer named Glenn. When he sees the distressed girl, he acts quickly, loads Chris into his truck, and takes him home. Despite all the medical help Glenn provides, Chris doesn't wake up. In the end, he stops breathing. Reese breaks down in tears, and then the door suddenly bursts open after her father dies. That night, she and Glenn bury him in the garden and stand there for a moment, praying for him. The next day, Glenn decides to help Reese and take her to her grandfather. After a while, they begin their journey in his truck. Meanwhile, Frank, tired of waiting, decides to go look for them himself. After a few hours, he finds their crashed car and even spots a piece of their blood-stained clothing nearby. He follows the trail and eventually arrives at the farmhouse. Inside, he is shocked to see bloodstains on a couch, which makes him suspicious. He searches the house but finds nothing. Then he looks closely at a picture of Glenn before stepping outside. That's when he notices a freshly used shovel and Chris's clothes. This leads him to the spot where Chris was buried. Now, Frank realizes that Chris is dead. But he has no time to grieve. His granddaughter Reese is missing. On the other side, Glenn notices a man on the road asking for help. He quickly tells Reese to hide behind the car for extra safety, as he's worried the man might have bad intentions. It turns out Glenn was right because the man pulls a gun on him and kills him. Then, he gets into Glenn's car and drives away with Reese, who is in shock, sitting in the back. After some time, he stops at an auto repair shop and sneaks in to steal gas from another car. Suddenly, a hunter shoots him, and Reese seizes the opportunity to escape. But after a short while, the same hunter catches her, covers her with a cloth, and when she wakes up, she finds herself in front of an old, strange woman. The woman tells Reese that she trespassed on her property, and now she must pay the price. Meanwhile, Frank finds Glenn's body lying on the road and realizes he's the same man from the photo he saw. This makes him even more determined to find Reese and figure out what happened. Back at the old woman's house, she introduces Reese to her family during dinner. She tells her that the hunter is her son, Billy, and also introduces her to her shy grandson, Quinn. It turns out Billy's father used to beat him and insult him for no reason. After the introductions, Reese tells them how she ended up there, and says she can't stay long. She has to get to her grandfather as soon as possible. However, the old woman doesn't sympathize with her and refuses to let her leave. Instead, she forces Reese to stay in the attic for the night. With no other choice, Reese goes upstairs to sleep. But she has no intention of staying the night, and tries to escape. She sneaks toward the front door while everyone is asleep, unlocks it, but the old woman hears the sound of the lock and orders Billy to chase her. He runs after her and eventually catches Reese, dragging her back to the house against her will. When Reese regains consciousness, she finds herself tied up inside a sack, hanging from a tree. At that moment, a massive bear approaches and tries to tear the sack open to eat her. But Billy arrives just in time and shoots the bear. That's when Reese realizes she was just bait. They used her to lure the bear so they could hunt it. After the hunt, Billy locks her inside a small storage room and leaves her there for a week. One day, he takes her out, and the old woman tries to convince Reese to stay with them and marry one of her sons. But Reese tells her she would rather stay locked in that room than live in a house full of lunatics. The old woman grants her wish and orders her son to lock Reese back in the storage room. This time, he ties her hands and feet. Desperate to escape, Reese eventually manages to break free from the ropes. However, she has no idea how to get out of there. At that moment, she notices Quinn watching her through a small gap in the door. Thinking fast, she realizes that he feels sorry for her and decides to use this to her advantage. She pleads with him to help her escape. Surprisingly, Quinn, fed up with his father and grandmother's cruelty, agrees to help her. He sneaks her out of the storage room, and together, they escape in the middle of the night. The next morning, Billy discovers they've escaped and immediately starts tracking them. He follows their footprints and the broken branches in the forest, confident that he will catch them. Meanwhile, Reese and Quinn grow closer. They stop to eat some berries after running for a long time. After a while, they find themselves at the edge of a steep slope. Quinn slips and nearly falls to his death, but Reese saves him just in time. Then, they come across a large fallen tree and decide to use it as a bridge to cross. Just as they start walking across carefully, Billy suddenly appears and shoots at them. Fortunately, he misses. Terrified, they run as fast as they can, crossing a huge lake. Realizing they can't outrun Billy, they decide to hide underwater to avoid being seen. Once Billy passes by, Reese and Quinn resurface and run in the opposite direction. But since Billy is an experienced hunter, he spots them and chases after them until he finally catches them. Quinn sacrifices himself to buy Reese some time to escape or hide. While they fight, Billy's gun falls near Reese. At first, she hesitates to use it, but when she sees that Billy is about to kill Quinn, she picks up the gun, aims, and shoots. However, to her surprise, the shot didn't come from her gun, it was Frank. He had been tracking them and heard the gunshots, which led him straight to them. Reese runs to Frank, crying, and hugs him tightly. In the next scene, we see them several years later. Although the world is still recovering from the electromagnetic storm, life in the mountains provides them with everything they need. Reese finds many messages from her friends, meaning that electricity has finally been restored, and the crisis is over. And that's where the movie ends. If you enjoyed the film, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.